Hello, everyone. Welcome to Overtime. The House Committee, the House Budget Committee has failed to pass a bill. This is the actual name of the bill. Quote, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was named as a nod to a certain tangerine that shall remain nameless. It's the budget bill, and we're going to get into how and why it did not get out of committee, but it has, they can vote on it again. They will vote on it again. The vote failed 16 to 21 in a committee that is run by Republicans, and Republicans have the chair of every committee in the House because they are the majority in the House. So for it to lose 16 to 21. There is some indication that they knew ahead of time that they were at least in trouble. Speaker Johnson asked one of the Republican congressmen who had left because his wife had just given birth, asked him to come back explicitly to vote on this bill because they needed the votes. Nonetheless, they did fail. Perhaps Johnson is now reconsidering his opposition to having senators and congressmen vote remotely. Anyways, all that notwithstanding, let's talk a bit about this bill and why it failed to pass. And I'm going to give me a second here. Let's see. And I know we have a number of people in the live chat. Thank you all for joining us. Ooh, and I do hear that sound. Let me get that. We'll get rid of that. All right. So, why did it fail to pass? How did... Where's... Yeah. There we go. So, let's talk about the budget. Fun. All of the Democrats are united against this bill. Why? Well, for the most part, the same reason they're united against every conservative bill. It is for tax cuts. It believes in the economic principle of stimulating the economy by putting more money into the economy, by taking less money out for government spending, yada, yada, yada. We've all heard this before. We all know why. So the bill has a lot of tax cuts. We'll get into how and what those are in just a minute. And pays for those cuts by spending cuts in Medicare, Medicaid, and numerous social programs. Deep cuts in those programs, cuts almost to the Doge level. Not quite. Again, we'll get to that in a minute. The other interesting thing, though, is it has a significant increase in military spending, so it is not deficit neutral. This bill actually adds to the deficit. It adds to the deficit quite considerably. The, quote, tax cuts are so high that even the spending cuts don't compensate for them. And then when you add to it the increase in military spending, this adds dramatically to the U.S. deficit. Let's talk about the U.S. deficit for a minute. Well, there's an interesting problem. So there's most fields require some form of assumption in order to operate. Geometry makes assumptions. A point does not exist. A point is assumed to exist in geometry. So is a line, so is a circle. These are things that they can't prove. They just say, okay, we assume they exist, and then we do geometry past that. Science makes a number of assumptions. People don't always think that it does, but it does. It makes assumptions such as there are laws to this universe, that those laws remain constant and are discoverable, that those laws are not localized, which is to say that the laws of physics, the laws of the universe remain the same on Earth as they do on Mars, as they do on in other parts of in other galaxies even, that the laws of physics are the same. So you find assumptions in every field. One of the assumptions that economics makes is that people will act in their own best interests. That is an assumption that is required for economics to work. And for the most part, it's true. Now, your own best interests can be interesting to define. If you have children, you may put your children first, but that's actually still acting in your own best interest, because in your mind, your children are more important to you than you are, so you are acting in your best interest by protecting them even with your own life. So most people do, almost all the time, act in their own best interests. Libertarian economics takes this concept to a bit of a new level and says that you can trust this concept so much that you should hand the entire economy over to individuals and or corporations and keep the government completely out of it. When the economic collapse of 2007, 2008 happened, Alan Greenspan was being grilled over how and why this happened. Now, he is a student of Ayn Rand, and he said this should not have happened. I don't understand how this happened, because corporations did something that was quite remarkable in some respects, certainly quite remarkable if you're neoliberal or follow that particular brand of economics. They acted against their own self-interests. They sold themselves out. They undermined their own basic principles, and they undermined their future survival for immediate gains here and now. Why? Well, because corporations aren't people, and everybody in those corporations was still acting in their own best interests, including the CEO, who realized that he could make a tremendous amount of money goosing the stocks of that company by selling its future short, not investing in the future, but basically selling off everything that makes the company operate and then bailing out on a golden parachute. And in one way or another, that's what everybody was doing. When you hear about the CDOs and everything that caused the economy to collapse in 2007, it was people selling products they knew were bad, they knew would cause their own companies to collapse, but they could make a lot of money selling them. And they figured, well, I'll have all this money by the time the corporation collapses. Unfortunately, governments are somewhat the same thing. I say all that to say this. What you're seeing here is a image of and this is from the GAO and the Government Budget Office. GAO is a Government Accountability Office, on the fiscal debt. And what you can see is, and is this the debt or the deficit? Debt versus GDP. So this is debt to GDP ratio. And this is very important, because GDP is basically how much money we make or produce. And you can see even during COVID-19, the numbers were, they were quite high. They were higher than they had been since World War II. But look at that projection. And the reason this is concerning, and this should be concerning to Democrats and Republicans alike, is because just like a business, there's only so much debt a country can get into before it collapses. Greece had this problem and had to be bailed out if it was to remain a country. Greece was a reasonably easy country to bail out, and still nobody wanted to do it. But it was reasonably small. Bailing out the United States would be a completely different thing. This here is tracking the national debt, and you can see that in the 80s, our debt was less than 5 trillion. It was about 3 trillion, 2 to 3 trillion in the 80s, hit 5 trillion around the year 2000. 5 trillion. 5 trillion. And I remember distinctly when 5 trillion was a lot. 2010, it hit 10 trillion. We doubled it. And at that point, people were starting to talk about the fact that it is unsustainable. We cannot, as a country, sustain this level of debt. But the problem is The congressmen who have been elected by us want to keep their jobs. What is in their best interest? It's in their best interest to find a way to keep their constituents happy, even if it's not what's in their constituents' best interest. We don't always know or do what's in our own best interest. If we have a short-term reward, we may sell out the long-term for it. So what ends up happening is the budget keeps going up, and the deficit keeps going up. The deficit is now about $32 trillion. And look at where it has gone in the last 20 years compared to the 50 years before that. That's insane. And it is, by some, according to some economists, we've reached the point of, we've surpassed the point of a lack of sustainability. How we deal with that number, I don't know. It's so big, most people choose not to think about it, but the reality is it could cause a sovereign debt crisis that could cause the United States to collapse. There are some economists who will tell you, no, we can print our way out of it. We can print money. We've done it before. That causes inflation, the likes of which you've never seen, and pisses a lot of other countries off because you're creating more money to pay them back with, but that dilutes the value of the money that everybody already has because you've doubled or tripled the amount of money in supply. So that number is a staggering problem that nobody wants to talk about. You will not get elected talking about that number. I remember when Ross Perot, who was still pretty nutty, but I remember he said he was going to increase gas taxes. And I was like, okay, he's right. They need to go up for any number of reasons, but he just shot him. He's not going to get elected. Nobody's going to elect him because even though he's right, nobody cares. It's not what they want to hear. So we have a tremendous spending problem. And it's gotten much worse very rapidly and very recently. Conservatives tend to be the ones who worry about the budget more than liberals. Liberals keep adding programs and saying we'll figure out how to pay for it later. Their usual choice of how to pay for it is by taxing the wealthy, which gets harder to do because those taxes get rolled back by conservatives who say no, we should just not be having these programs and we shouldn't be spending on them. When you get the worst of both worlds, you get the programs, they're not properly funded, so they're not doing a good job. The conservatives say, well, these programs are failing, which they are, but they're not being funded properly. But they're still sort of being funded, so the deficit is also going up while they're spending more on the military because somehow spending more than every other country in the world combined on the military isn't enough, and we need to spend more. Someone's going to have to explain that one to me at some point. It has to stop somewhere. The golden goose will stop. And I know they had this conversation at Goldman Sachs in 2007. I know they did because books have been written on the conversations they were having when people were realizing this just couldn't keep going on forever, but nobody wanted to be the one left holding the bag. I say all that to say this. The 5 Republicans, the Democrats who opposed it, have opposed this bill because it does 2 things. One, massive cuts to aid programs to, quote, lower the deficit. I say, quote, because it doesn't lower the deficit. But that's what the excuse was for the cuts. So, massive cuts to lower the deficit, to Medicare, Medicaid, their primary objection, cuts to other programs, but those 2 are the ones that so Democrats, 16, not 16, less than 16, would be 15, united completely against this bill. It is 16. So every one of them voted against this bill. Most of the Republicans voted for it. Now, the Republicans have had a pretty strong alliance behind Trump and behind Speaker Johnson. This is important because as long as they have that, Trump is untouchable. It is why he has been able to take money out of agencies that he is not legally allowed to take from, and Congress doesn't stop him. The judiciary doesn't have the ability to stop him. They can say stop, but they can't enforce it. And Congress can enforce it, but they won't. So a crack like this is interesting. The 5 Republicans who defected said that they defected for one reason and one reason only. You cannot have a $36 trillion debt. The debt has to go down, and they called this bill a lie. Representative Chip Roy of Texas said something needs to change if you're going to, or you're not going to get my support. He said, let's see, something along the lines of, I'm trying to find the exact quote. It was an interesting quote. Yeah, this bill has backloaded savings and front-loaded spending. I am a no on this bill unless serious reforms are made. I now have to admonish my colleagues on this side of the aisle. This bill falls profoundly short. It does not do what we say it does in response to deficits. That's the truth. Deficits will go up for the first half of the 10-year budget window, and we all know it's true. And we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't say that we're doing something we're not doing. What he's referring to is, while there are significant cuts in Medicare and Medicaid, now I had said earlier, I'd put taxes in quotes. The reason is because while it's my understanding that this does add a few tax cuts, it doesn't add a whole bunch. What it does is it takes the original Trump tax cuts and extends them. They're set to expire at the end of this year. It extends them and has them continuing. Every analysis by the Congressional Budget Office the GAO, every analysis of the budget going forward assumes that those tax cuts expire. So the projections of our deficit assume that those tax cuts expire, because right now, that's what they're slated to do. This bill, this great, beautiful bill, as it is actually called, will extend those cuts and make them permanent. Those cuts are to the absolute wealthiest Americans, and it's a tremendous. It was a huge cut then. It hasn't, to the best of my understanding, stimulated the economy per se. I find it interesting that they do all of these tax cuts that are supposed to stimulate the economy, and then they complain about the status of the economy. Well, I was going to say you can't have it both ways, but this is Washington. They have it both ways. I was going to make a very bad joke. Okay. What these so-called deficit hawk Republicans are concerned about is that they are increasing spending on military. They are decreasing projected revenue by continuing these tax cuts that are set to expire. So revenue is going to go down and spending is going to go up. The cuts on Medicare and Medicaid are insufficient to offset what they're increasing on the military side, let alone the loss of revenue from the tax cuts. So these 5 have said that they are not going to support it. What does this mean going forward? Good question. Trump's reply to this. Let me see if I can find Trump's reply. Let's see. Well, we had one interesting. Who is this? GOP Representative Tom McClintock from California said, these people, meaning the five deficit hawks, promised their constituents not to raise their taxes, and these 5 no votes just voted for the biggest tax increase in American history. Sort of. If you want to be technical about it, they voted for they voted to allow a tax decrease to expire, which on a spreadsheet is the same thing as voting for a tax increase. It's the same thing, but in reality, it's 2 different things. It's the money's the same, but how and why you got there, none of them are voting for a tax increase. They're just allowing a decrease to expire. And there is a difference, and there's a difference to your constituents, and there's a difference to, we won't get into the trolley problem here, but ethically there's a considerable difference. Also, they're not voting for this, quote, increase on 99% of their constituents. This increase is on the wealthiest Americans. It's not on anyone in the middle class. It's not on anyone earning, I think the cap was $150,000 or less. So if you're earning $150,000 or less, your taxes aren't going up based on the expiration of the previous tax cuts. So no, they didn't do that. That's just a talking point. Trump, meanwhile, has complained bitterly and said that he may come back early from his trip to the Middle East. He takes it that seriously. It's very rare he gets off the golf course or changes his plans for anything. And in this case, he's taking this very seriously. So how serious is it? That's a really good question. One thing you have to realize, every time the opposing party gets into power, I help the minority party feel better about it by pointing out that when the majority party when you're the minority power, when you are the minority party, you have one job. One job. Become the majority. That's it. And that's what the Democrats are trying to do now. That's why they're all united against this bill. Once you're the majority, you've got 2 jobs. Stay the majority, which isn't easy, and satisfy your constituents, which isn't easy. And both of those often conflict. So all of a sudden, every time, and you see this every time there's a majority and you get a Speaker of the House and he comes up and says, we're going to do so much stuff. It's like, no, you're not, because now everybody is their own constituent. When you're the minority party, you are a solid group of 1. You're a constituency of 1. When you're the majority party, everybody wants their agenda filled. Everybody says, now that we're the majority, I was promised I'd get my agenda, even though it conflicts with the other guy who you promised would get his agenda. And so now they got to do everybody's agenda. And if somebody thinks that their agenda is not getting filled, they have real power because they're in the majority. So they can say, I'm going to withhold my vote. So what you have is 5 Republicans who have decided to withhold their vote until they get what they want. One, that gets other Republicans saying, maybe if I withhold my vote, I can get more. So everyone's starting to think about what they can get, and the majority starts to fall apart. So that's one of the interesting things that starts to happen in this dynamic. The Speaker of the House knows that. Trump knows that. They've seen that enough. They know that that's exactly what happens. That's why you have a majority whip whose job it is to keep everybody in line, and that's why the Speaker of the House has such a hard job, is because it's actually much harder to be in the majority than it is to be in the minority. So now they have to convince these 5 to switch. Actually, they only need to convince 4, but because the Democrats are united, they need to convince them. And every one of them knows they hold a lot of power. So you end up in sort of a Nash equilibrium or Nash prisoner's dilemma. How long are they going to hold out and for what? That's a good question. We've heard from a number of them so far. They've all referenced how big the deficit is, how big the debt is, and that this bill contributes to it. So all of them object to that. They are correct in objecting to that. That's not my principal objection to it, but it's one of them, so I'm very glad. How are they going to solve it? Well, unfortunately, if you're a Democrat, they're not going to solve it in the way that you may like. One of them so far has said the cuts to Medicare and Medicaid need to be much bigger in order to lower the deficit. Trump is unlikely to support that because he knows that that's going to cut into his base. So are they going to find the cuts out of the military? Or are they going to find the cuts somewhere else? Or are they going to do some back-end wheeling and dealing and say, look, we'll find a way to satisfy you in some other way. We just need your vote right now, here, today. And what's a pet project in your district that you need in order to get reelected, and we'll find a way to make it happen. This is being hailed right now as a catastrophic blow to the Trump administration. It might be. It's the first significant sign of a very real crack. The problem is, sometimes things like this are easily solved because Johnson's going to go in and he's going to point out that if they don't all agree and if they don't all find a way to pass this, they might as well just give up their majority. And he's correct, and every one of them knows he's correct. But every one of them is also correct when they say you can't keep kicking this can down the road. So there is a very real problem. There are now 5 conservative Republicans that seem to have admitted and acknowledged not only that there's a real problem, but that they are lying to the American people about the size of the deficit and what this bill will do, which they are. Everybody who has said that this bill will reduce the deficit has lied. And to the best of my knowledge, every one of these 5 Republicans has come out and said it, and the others seem to concur that it's a lie. This will increase the deficit. Everybody knows it. Now what? That's a good question. The committee has adjourned till Monday. Trump is considering returning, which the fact that he's taking it that seriously, because normally he's just like, I'll leave it to somebody else, or is interesting. It doesn't mean it's a huge blow. We'll have to wait and see. The reason people are calling it a huge blow is because it's the first time that I can see that Republicans have stood up to the Trump agenda, not Trump himself, he's not there, but stood up to the Trump agenda in a way that was meaningful and put everything on hold. They were expecting to vote on the entire bill on the House floor on Monday. That can't happen now because it's not even out of committee. If it gets to the floor, it will pass. The reason is the people who want to be on the budget committee are the ones who care about the budget, the ones who care about the deficit and who care about the debt. So that's pretty much, it's those 5 that are really the ones who are concerned about it. The rest don't care in any meaningful way. So they'll be united. If it gets out of committee, it's going to pass. Trump will sign it into law. Democrats will tell you huge tax cuts. Yes, in a sense, they're extending the ones that are currently there. There's no significant new tax cuts. But yes, it's tax cuts that were supposed to expire are now going to be continued. It's going to be a huge cut in revenue. And they're not saying cuts in Medicaid, but they're cuts to the department that funds Medicaid. And Medicaid is the only place they can take it out of. Every everybody voting for this is going to have plausible deniability. They're going to say, well, we didn't tell them they had to take it out of Medicaid. They have to take it out of Medicaid. It's going to come out of Medicaid. So I don't know if this is a huge deal or not. It potentially is, because it looks like it's the first time somebody has stood up really and said the emperor's got no clothes. Now, we've had people say this before, but they haven't stopped the budget and it's a humiliating defeat for the entire Republican agenda. It's most humiliating to Johnson, because if he didn't have the votes, he shouldn't have let them vote on it. He can't control what the committee does, but he should have told the committee chair, don't have the vote, we don't want to lose. And they lost by a lot. That's huge. On a big, beautiful bill. If history is any judge, by Monday, enough pressure will have been applied by Trump himself and Johnson to enough of these 5 to flip it and just eke past the committee, get it into Congress, and it will pass. Get it into the House, and it will pass. I do not expect significant changes to this budget. If there are changes, I would expect a slight reduction in the tax cuts, a slight reduction in the military spending, and a moderate increase in the cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. That will probably please enough people. On the Republican side, the Democrats are already united. Not going to change their minds, don't need to. That will please enough people, get it out of committee. That's what I'm expecting. What I'm hoping for, what everybody listening to this is hoping for, I suspect, and what they're talking about when they say huge major setback, is that those 5 stand their ground and actually mean what they say, and that they're not showboating. Trump accused them of showboating. He put out on Truth Social a quote saying that the showboating needs to stop and we need to pass this big, beautiful spending bill. We've seen, and we've had the discussion with Zandering many times about how many conservatives actually have the conviction of their beliefs. It's very simple to talk about what you believe when times are easy. It's when your back is against the wall that your beliefs matter. And these 5 conservative Republicans, deficit hawks, have said this country is in jeopardy. And again, I'd like to this is debt to GDP. This is the ratio of debt to how much we're making, so our ability to pay it off. That's staggering. And then this is, of course, just how rapidly the debt has gone up. They're not wrong. There is such a thing as a sovereign debt crisis, and the U.S. is fast approaching it, and it does end countries. So that is the primary objection of all 5 of them on one way or another. It's that this bill increases the debt. I'm very impressed that one of them was willing to say we're all lying about it, because he's right. They all have been lying about it. We'll see where it goes. But the fact that 5 of them were willing to stand up is newsworthy. It is pretty big news, and how big it is will be determined by whether or not they fold and how long it takes for them to do so. Again, I anticipate they will. It's just a question of how and when. Michael Michaels, Trump announced a new jet fighter which will cost $1 trillion. Yeah, the F-55, which is going to have, so he wants to do 6th generation. He wants to have, the fighter is actually going to have drones that accompany it. So apparently the drones will be built in and can be deployed while the fighter, okay. I mean, military spending is always popular for any number of reasons. It employs people. It makes people feel safer. It's like, oh, we have a big military, yada, yada, yada. And again, people who aren't paying attention, the question is, what do we really need? I said earlier, we pay, or the F-47. I think he's now also talking about the F-55. The F-55's, yeah, the F-47's been approved. The F-55 is the one that he's now talking about that he wants to do. So military spending is it's even popular with Democrats. They say it's not, they say they're against it, but you know, oh my God, I can't believe I've forgotten the name of the congressman. I want to say Conley, but out of Groton, Connecticut. Groton has a submarine base, and you know, he was a Democrat, so he would talk about social programs, and it helped fund social programs, but he was very big into military funding too. He just didn't let people know it, and he didn't like it when people saw it because it didn't, you know, but Groton is a sub base, and it was the single most important element of his district. I wish I could remember his name. All right, what I'm going to do now is check in on Super Chats. So, Daddy Jim, 10 pounds. Hey, Nick, sir, please say God bless while Greg's not here. Please say God bless while Greg is not here. I can't, and I will tell you why. I have done communion when asked, and I have no problem with religious language, religious rituals. There's a monastery of Benedictine monks not far from here that I've been to several times. I know the monks there well, but I try to be very respectful of people and their religions, which means I actually, with taking communion, because I'm not Catholic, a friend of mine said, "Why don't you come with us?" And I said, "No, I'm not Catholic, and if I were Catholic, I would find it offensive if somebody who didn't believe was there with all the other believers." I was finally asked to, and it seemed like I would offend people more by not doing it, so I went ahead and did it. I don't mind, but and I say God bless, and I say all sorts of colloquialisms without a problem. But saying it in Greg's absence for either his honor or anything like that, I would not do. And the reason is because I respect Greg. Don't tell him I said that. I think doing it in that sense would be disrespectful as a non-believer. So I'm not going to apologies. Can't say it in that sense. I do appreciate the super chat, and we very much support Greg, and I like Greg a lot, and I like having him around. Again, don't tell him because you know, we need to keep his ego in check. Anyways. Duncan, $20, working but listening. Well, thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for your support. Delighted to be able to report on these things and bring them to you. Hopefully, this was a longer show than it's breaking news. I wanted to do it in 15 or 20 minutes. The problem is this is actually really complicated. How and why these 5 defected is complicated. The effect it has on Congress is possibly complicated. We don't know yet because we don't know how serious they are. They sound serious, but they always sound serious. And I've seen Democrats defect. Democrats defect all the time too, because they want their pet projects and then they get paid off to join the rest of the party. When you are in the majority, this is what happens. This is a PR nightmare, but can be overcome reasonably quickly if the Republicans get back on board. It is a true nightmare, and it is a true catastrophic blow if they are not back on board by Monday. a bill will pass. They can't stop it because the Republicans are united enough. They will find a way to make these men hurt if they don't pass it. But the question is, where are they going to land and how long is it going to take? And every day is a reminder that Johnson does not have as tight a control over Congress as he thinks he does, nor does Trump. Right now, we're only in a few hours in, so that's why, you know. But Duncan New, thank you for the $20 super chat, much appreciated. Also gifted 5 in-time memberships. Thank you very much for that, John Negregard. Hello, time travelers. Hello, all of you time travelers. Thank you very much for joining us for this overtime. I would like to have an in-time with 𝐒𝐨𝐿. I'm gonna call him up later today and see if we can discuss this, because this is a topic that is very close to his heart. And he has a lot to say about it, so we'll be discussing that. And he's a conservative who is also a deficit hawk, so he understands these 5 men better than I do. Blonde Bombsheller, $10. Guess who is now about to say God bless, and also worship Greg Terry. He's my hero. Is there a ban button? How do I ban people from the live chat? No, I'll have to figure that out. Of course, it's $10. I'm yeah, you know what? For $10, yeah, I guess. Oh, I think I confused what Daddy Jim was saying. I think I confused that. I inverted that. That I can say God bless while Greg is not here, because it's not gonna. I may have inverted what Daddy Jim was saying and took it the exact opposite of how it was meant. This is why I got to be a little careful with text. It's you don't get the intonation. So apologies if I inverted that. God bless the Crunch Wrap Supreme. That one I will get behind. Chicken fries at Burger King, I will have to say. All right, so I think everybody is up to date. For those of you just joining us, here is what has happened. Today there was a vote that was expected to pass to get the budget bill, which I swear to God is called the Great Big Beautiful Bill. That is the name that is emblazoned on the cover. It is essentially Trump's wish list. He has repeatedly said that this is the bill that he wants passed. It is essentially the 2025 ideal budget bill. The bill purportedly will stimulate the economy and reduce the deficit. Everybody who's looked at the numbers has said basically it will, at a minimum, increase the deficit. People who believe in trickle-down economics, which... never mind. The people who believe in it think it will stimulate the economy because it will, quote, cut taxes for the rich. It extends tax cuts for the rich. That is true. But that is one of the reasons why it, in fact, is going to increase the deficit significantly. It does cut Medicare and Medicaid to try to offset the damage it does, but it still does significant damage. For that reason, 5 Republicans have defected and voted no on the bill. This will allow that, and there's a procedural reason why the bill can be voted on again. I think at a certain point it can't. But they will be able to vote on the bill again. They have adjourned until Monday to vote again. If on Monday they fail to pass it, there will be a pretty significant fissure, I think, in the Republican Party. It will be reasonably small, but it doesn't have to be large because their majority is not that big. And if it's enough that they can stop one of the most important bills from getting through, and Trump's signature, I mean, Trump is considering coming back from the Middle East, which gave him a roving McDonald's that follows him everywhere, and his own gold line jet, and he's considering coming back just to fix this problem. So it's newsworthy. We don't know how big it is yet, because 5 out of 6 times the people who block a bill like this just want something reasonably small, and you can pay them off with whatever that is. Usually something for their district, something to help them get reelected. Who the hell knows? It's playground rules over there. So we'll see. But at a minimum, nobody was expecting that this bill was going to have a hard time passing a Republican-controlled committee in a Republican-controlled Congress, and right now it has been blocked. So we will see what happens, and we will continue with that. LJ Boone, $4.99. Oh, sorry, Stephen Walsh, $5. Dog bless the 7th generation fighter programs. That reminds me of the, what was it, the dyslexic philosopher with insomnia, the dyslexic religious philosopher with insomnia who stayed up all night wondering if there really was a dog. LJ Boone, $4.99, God bless the goat. Thank you, LJ Boone. I think that was very well said. I could not agree more. So thank you for that. And it's nice that you're finally on the same side. So that is where we stand. Join us on the Discord, and we will be following that. We're following the hubbub about the fighters and the 11, now 10, escaped Louisiana convicts. One of them has been captured, and everything else going to be on the Discord. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe and hit the bell, because that's the only way you're going to know when we go live. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you maybe tonight for Xandring and I to talk about the economics of this issue. Certainly Tuesday and or Thursday for downtime. Have a good night all.